Hello everybody and welcome to Decoding the WSL, the podcast dedicated to the stats and facts in the WSL. Today we're looking ahead to the weekend's games. It's the last few matches before the international break, including big matches in the top four and the bottom four. I'm going to be giving you all the numbers you need ahead of Gameweek 5. I'm your host, St Biccarino. Yes, here we are, listener. Thank you for joining me today. It is currently a bit of an early record this week. It's sort of lunchtime on Wednesday the 16th of October, so before the midweek Champions League games. Obviously, Chelsea, Arsenal and Man City are all in action tonight. I always like to see the English clubs do well in Europe, so fingers crossed there will be some success. But let's take a look ahead to the weekend's games. The fixtures start on Saturday afternoon, and after this summer's striker swap, Brighton and Man United face each other to see who got the better deal. Then on Sunday, winless Villa travel to unbeaten Man City, joint top scorers Daly and Bunny Shaw both looking to add to their tallies so far. Then Liverpool welcome Palace to St Helens in what you could call a mid-table clash. The two lowest scoring teams in the league, although defensively the best teams in the bottom six, they meet at the King Power as it's Leicester against Everton, a big game for both teams who will be wanting to turn around their season after a poor start. Will there be a new manager bounce for Arsenal as the Gunners visit the Hammers on Sunday afternoon? And then finally, Chelsea host Spurs at Kingsmeadow on Sunday evening, the last WSL game before the international break. But let's start the pod with Saturday's game. Yeah, Saturday sees two of the top four play each other. This one is at 12:30, live on YouTube on Saturday afternoon. There's Sophie Baggerly, Maria Thorisdottir and Maya Letizia all playing against their old sides, as well as I mentioned at the start, the two strikers, Elizabeth Turland and Nikita Paris, both facing the sides that they left in the summer. Man United are still expected to be without Mallard, Sandberg and Evie Rabjon, although Jade Riviere and Jace might be back after picking up knocks and missing the Spurs game last weekend. Head-to-head, it's looking pretty close in the table. Man United are actually only ahead of Brighton in the table on goal difference, and that is only by 1. Brighton finished last season with 5 losses in a row at home, but they've got a 100% record this season, scoring 4 goals in each of their home games so far. There haven't been quite so many goals in Manchester United's last 3 away games, which have all ended up being 1-0, and they've won 2 of those. Head-to-head, Manchester United have won 7 of the last 8 meetings with Brighton. The only one that they didn't win was a draw in early 2020 away at Brighton. In fact, these sides played 14 times in total, with Brighton only winning 1 of those, which was a 1-0 win in the WSL back in April 2021. This season, however, Brighton are the team that have scored the most goals in home matches with 8, although they are hosting a team in Man United that are the only team yet to concede in the league. So, again, like I've mentioned before, my favourite phrase is going to be a bit of the unstoppable force versus the immovable object. Brighton, you can sort of tell the way that Daria Vidicic is trying to get them to play because they have the most successful take-ons in the league this year with 47, and they have the best success rate with 55%. City are the only other team that have succeeded with over 50% of the take-ons they've attempted. So Brighton are not only doing it a lot, but they're very good at it. Brighton are also the only team that have used all their substitutes this season. Dario Vidicic is rotating well in his matches. This is something that I've highlighted before, and I'd expect to continue this weekend. In terms of how this game is going to go, I think it's going to be quite a close game. Both teams, obviously in the top 4 at the moment, have had a really good start to the season. Brighton's is a good start to the season considering their expectations. I think a lot of people didn't know how well they do, especially with losing Elizabeth Turland. But Man United are just absolutely steamrolling at the moment. They are 3 wins from 3. They haven't conceded a goal. And I think this is going to continue. The game will probably be tight on a lot of stats. You know, they'll have similar possession, similar number of shots, things like that. But I think Man United have got the more clinical strikers, especially with Turland. I think Fallon Tullis-Joyce this season has been the best goalkeeper in the league. So I'm going to go for a Manchester United win, and I think they're going to maintain their clean sheet record, despite the fact Brighton have the most goals at home in the league this year. So I'm going to go for a 2-0 Manchester United win. So that is the only game that is on Saturday, and now we are moving on to the Sunday matches, starting off with the first match of the day, Live on BBC Two, kicking off at 12:15, it is Manchester City hosting Aston Villa. Laura Blinkendal-Brown is back at Villa after she left the club in January. In terms of team news, I don't think there's too much to report on, although Viv Miedema might be back this weekend. I think she is potentially going to be playing tonight. As I say, I'm recording this Wednesday lunchtime, so don't quote me on that. We'll probably know by the time you're listening to this whether Viv Miedema definitely will be or is still a potential return this weekend. In the WSL this season, Man City are table toppers so far with 10 points from their 4 games. Villa are almost last. They're bottom on points, but they are above the drop zone purely on goal difference. The last time Aston Villa won away at Man City was actually just over 17 years ago. It was October 2007 in the Women's National League. In all competitions, Man City have won their last 5 games, conceding just 1 goal. That obviously doesn't include the match against St Helens later today. You know, that might be 6 games by then. We'll have to see how they get on. But that 1 goal they've conceded in their last 5 games, as I record, was that 0.02 XG shot from Olivia Smith away at Liverpool this weekend. City are actually 7 matches unbeaten in the WSL. Their only match where they haven't won out of those 7 was the 2-2 against Arsenal. The other 6 they've picked up victories. And they've won 9 of their last 10 matches at home in all competitions. So they're going to be a formidable force. They're yet to concede at home in the WSL. And yeah, it's going to be really hard for Villa to take them down. In fact, Man City, as well as scoring a lot of goals, don't concede that many. In fact, last season, they only conceded 2 or more goals once, which was in a 2-1 loss to Arsenal. And they were winning at the 88th minute. It was only a couple of late Blackstenius goals that won it for Arsenal. Villa are kind of the other end of the spectrum. They're not horrendously bad, you know, they're not as bad as City are good, but they're now 5 games without a win in the WSL, and that will likely be 6, I think. Man City are going to be the better team in this game. Aston Villa are going to do well to not come away with a loss. As I mentioned in the start, Rachel Daly and Bunny Shaw are the joint top scorers in the league this season, both on 3. And with 1 assist as well, they are both joint top for goal involvements as well on 4. City have accumulated the most XG this season with 8.5 and also have the best expected goal difference. They've also accumulated the most XG in home matches this year at 5.6, which is quite a lot, especially considering there's only been 2 home matches for them so far. They have the highest possession in the league at 66%, quite a way above the next best team, which is Arsenal at 58%. City have had the most progressive passes in the league with 240, with Leah Alexandri being the player with the most. They're the only team with over 2,000 passes completed. They've done 2,351 in total. And they also have the best pass completion at 87%. They've also had the most shots this season with 71, although it is worth noting that Villa are 3rd on that stat with 63. And then City have also had the most shot creating actions. So there's going to be a lot of domination, I think, from City in this game, and I think they're going to build on those stats, you know, with terms of shots and possession. Villa can stand up for themselves a little bit. They have actually had the 2nd most touches in the opposition's box this season with 138, only 1 behind Arsenal, who are top, and 10 ahead of City, who are 3rd. So Villa have actually had more touches in the opposition's box than Man City have this season. Villa have also attempted the most crosses this season with 113, and that's something that I was quite surprised at. I'd probably have expected Liverpool to be dominating that stat because they have won the most aerial duels this season by quite some distance. But no, Villa are the team that have attempted the most crosses, and interestingly, Man City are the team that have defended the fewest crosses. So it seems like Villa are attempting to put in as many crosses as possible, and the way that City are setting up means that teams are not putting in crosses against them, or they just don't want to put crosses in against Man City because they're good in the air. It'll be interesting to see how that happens this weekend, because will it be that Villa are going to keep playing by their style and keep putting crosses in, or will City's defence be good enough to prevent them from doing that? City have also made the fewest subs in the league with 11. I think this is a number that they're going to be low down as the season goes on. Similar to last season, Gareth Taylor doesn't seem to trust his bench that much, or doesn't seem to want to rotate that much. I think that only really adds fuel to the fire, especially with the whole Kelly situation at the moment. Chloe Kelly being rumoured to leave in January, most likely, because of her lack of pitch time, despite the fact she's been called up to the England squad still. I think in terms of how I believe this game will go, I think you can probably work out from the tone of my voice, if nothing else, about exactly what I'm saying so far, is that I think City are going to dominate the game. Villa will have some opportunities, but not too many. Man City will have most of the ball, they'll have most of the shots. I don't think there'll be too much rotation from Man City. You know, it's not like the last game where they were resting some players to give them a break. It's the match before the international break. He's not going to care too much about resting Bunny Shaw and resting Jess Park or resting Viv Miedemar if she's fit, players like that. He's just going to put his best team out to get some goal differences, nothing else. So I'm going to predict that this match is going to finish 3-0 to Man City. On to the 2 o'clock game on Sunday, and it is Liverpool hosting Crystal Palace, the newbies to the league. Palace have a couple of players that are heading back to their former club in Liverpool, which is Annabelle Blanchard and Katie Stengel. Incidentally, the only players that have either a goal or an assist for Crystal Palace this season, both coming against Leicester a few games ago. Olivia Smith went off injured, obviously at half-time against Man City. It's unclear at the moment whether that's a long-term injury, whether that's just a little knock. It didn't look too bad. I think it happened when she scored her goal, and she still played about another 5 minutes before the substitution was actually made. So I'm expecting that will likely not be too long an injury for Olivia Smith, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. Maybe wait for the press conference, probably on Friday for that. Tegan Micah is another person that might be back in the squad by now. She's been out for, longer than Liverpool would like, especially because they've only really got one keeper at the moment. They've been naming Rachel Laws as their main keeper during the game, as they did quite a lot last season, but didn't name one on the bench. I was listening to, I think it was on the YOA Sheet podcast earlier this week, and they were mentioning that Jan Daniels was the player that was warming up sort of to be the second goalkeeper in case something went wrong and Rachel Laws had to come off. So they'll be welcoming Tegan Micah back, and I think after the performances that Rachel Laws has put in so far this season, she's not necessarily done enough to cement her spot. So there'll be a bit of rotation. I don't know whether Tegan Micah will just take that number one spot, or there'll be a bit of rotation like there was last season. We'll have to wait and see. These sides have only faced each other 4 times before, all in the Championship actually. Liverpool won all 4 by an aggregate of 11-1, so quite a one-sided affair, and I guess that's why Liverpool came up a bit earlier than Crystal Palace did. Katie Stengel did score in the last one, obviously not at Palace at the time. She was at Liverpool, and that was a 4-0 win. That was the last time these two sides met. Liverpool are unbeaten in the WSL against teams outside last season's top 3, so Arsenal, Man City and Chelsea, for over a year now. In fact, yesterday it was a year to the day since they last lost a game against a team outside the top 3. So that'll be a record they'll be hoping and probably expecting to continue this weekend. This will be Liverpool's 9th home game in the WSL in 2024. Of the 8 that they've played so far, they have scored exactly 1 goal in over half of them. In fact, 5 of the 8 games have seen Liverpool scoring exactly 1 goal. So if Palace can score at least 2, they may have enough to get past Liverpool. However, Palace have not seen a game where both teams have scored in their last 8 games in all competitions. In fact, only 1 of their last 14 games have had both teams scoring. So once one team scores in a Crystal Palace game, you can probably put a decent bet on that's going to be the team that's going to win the game. Looking at some of the numbers from this season, you may be unsurprised to hear that the numbers for Liverpool are a little bit more positive than the numbers for Palace. So I'm going to start with the Palace ones, then we can get on to some of the more positive ones after. Palace have the highest XG against in the WSL this season at 9.8, and therefore end up having the worst expected goal difference at minus 7.1. So you would expect that they have conceded probably 10 goals and have a goal difference of minus 7, but actually it's even worse than that. They have the most goals conceded at 12 and the worst goal difference at minus 10. So they are both conceding and having a worse goal difference overall than even their XG would suggest, and their XG is already the worst. They also have the worst discipline record in the league. They've had 9 yellow cards and a red card already. So in terms of defending is not going great because they're conceding, and they're also giving away lots of fouls and bad ones because they're bad enough to get cards. You might hope that going forward is their, shining light, especially after the amount of goals they scored last season. But no, they've only scored 2 goals, which both came against Leicester. And in fact, they haven't actually scored in the first half of the WSL game, well, ever. I was going to say this season, but obviously this is their first season in the WSL. In terms of a bit more on the defensive stats, I've wanted to pick out one about shots on target faced, because Crystal Palace have faced the most shots on target in the WSL this season at 33, so just over 8 a game. Obviously, there's only been 4 games so far. Liverpool, however, have faced the fewest shots on target with just 9, so they've faced just over 2 shots on target per game. Yeah, so about a quarter, just shy of a quarter of the number of shots on target, which I think demonstrates the way that each of these teams approach matches and the way that they defend, I guess, because Liverpool don't even allow their opposition to get a shot on target. Liverpool going forward, however, are a team that attacks in a very certain way by the look of the numbers, because they have the most shot-creating actions from dead ball situations in the league this year with 12. So 3 per game. You can expect 3 times in a game Liverpool are going to get a shot away from some sort of dead ball situation, whether that's a corner, a free kick, a throw-in, etc. Liverpool have also, and this sort of goes into the same vein, but they've also won the most aerial duels in the league, and they have the second best aerial duel win percentage with 56%. Only Spurs are ahead of them. So you can tell from those numbers that the way they're trying to attack is by winning aerial duels. They're trying to get dead balls, they're trying to put crosses in probably, and win headers. And to be honest, it's something they're quite good at, so why would you not do things that you're good at? In terms of how I think this game's going to go, I think Liverpool are going to try and capitalise on that sort of tactic. I think they're going to want to beat Palace in the air. They're going to be that dominant force, especially with Sophie Roman-Hauge. She's excellent at it. If they've got an Olivia Smith, that will definitely be even more of a reason to go in the air, because Olivia Smith's not necessarily the best in the air. That's not really what they brought her in for. So if she's out, they're going to resort back to what the rest of the team is very good at. I don't think Crystal Palace are going to get much of a look in this game, so I'm going to predict the score is going to be Liverpool 2, Palace 0. Now on to a game which I think could end up being the most interesting game in the league, but also could end up being the most boring game in the league this weekend. It is Sunday, 3 o'clock, live on YouTube. It is Leicester hosting Everton. Hannah Kane back at her former side, or I say back at her former side, she's likely to still be out injured, alongside Shannon O'Brien, Lainey Peterman, and we now know Jutta Rantala is out injured. She was seen on crutches at the weekend at the game, so not a good sign for Leicester when their only goal scorer this season is now out on crutches. Everton also don't have a player on the pitch that scored a goal this season. That's not an injury thing, that's just because none of their players have scored. Their only goal this season came from an own goal against West Ham last time out, so there won't be a player on the pitch in this game that has scored a goal in the WSL this season. Leicester are on a streak of 13 competitive games without a win. 7 of those have come at home, so they're not in a sort of good space at the moment in terms of their last results. However, they have won their last 3 games against Everton. The last time Everton beat Leicester was actually in September 2022, and the last time they beat them at Leicester was back in November 2021, so almost 3 years ago. Leicester do have, although they're in a bad run of form at the moment, they do have a good record against the team they're hosting at the weekend. As I mentioned, Everton are the only team in the league yet to have a player score, and they've also had 0 goal-creating actions as well. They've also created the lowest XG in the league, although that is at 2.7, so you'd expect a team getting 2.7 XG would have scored at least 1, if not 2 or 3 goals so far. Leicester, interestingly, actually have the best record against post-shot XG. So if you're new here, post-shot XG is basically XG but adjusted to only include shots on target. It's a stat that doesn't necessarily lend itself to analysing strikers, but definitely does for analysing goalkeepers, because, the XG that a goalkeeper faces, you only really want to look at the XG of shots they've faced rather than ones that were off target. In fact, Leicester have faced 6.3 post-shot XG, so from just on the shots on target they faced, but they've only conceded 4 goals. That's not necessarily one of their keepers doing better than the other. They've actually shared the minutes this season between Lisa Kopp and Janina Leipzig, as you'd probably expect when you've got 2 quite good goalkeepers. But they're both doing quite well at it, and they're both individually performing better than the post-shot XG that they're facing. So it shows that they're not just quite good defensively, but they're actually really good, not just preventing shots and preventing goal-scoring opportunities, but once they come in, their goalkeepers are of a very high standard to keep them in the game. You think of Janina Leipzig against Aston Villa making that save at the end against Anna Patten. Perfect example of this. Defensively, for the rest of the team, Leicester are still quite good. They won the most tackles in the league with 77, and they've made the most interceptions with 54. They're also the most fouled team in the league with 50. So 50 fouls drawn. In terms of fouls committed, however, they are the second worst team in the league, alongside Everton, actually. Both teams have committed 44 fouls this season so far in just 4 matches, 11 a game, which is quite a lot. Everton have made the most blocks this season, so they've put in some good defensive numbers as well, but Leicester are definitely the team that are better defensively. As I've mentioned at the start of this little bit, I think it's going to be a really important game for the league. It could end up being a really exciting game with 2 teams that are at the bottom of the league, only separated by goal difference, looking to get their season back on track. I say back on track, and actually getting their first win of the season and scoring some decent goals as well. But it's going to be quite difficult when both teams are so good defensively as well. Everton and Leicester defend in quite different ways. Everton is more from their press. Leicester is more from sort of quite a deep low block and then counter-attacking. I think these 2 things might not cancel each other out, but I do think they'll both contribute to not many goals being scored in this game. And you're not going to hear this from me much this season because WSL is a very high-scoring league, but I'm going to predict that this match is going to finish 0-0. The other game at 3 o'clock on Sunday, also live on YouTube, is West Ham hosting Arsenal. There are 4 former Arsenal players in the West Ham team at the moment. Shannon Cook, Anouk Denton, Halle Hussein and Ruby Doe. Wouldn't necessarily expect all of those players to be featuring this weekend, but they are still within the West Ham squad. Not much has changed at West Ham recently with players. They've still got Mewis out in a long-term injury, but Arsenal is where the excitement is, I guess, for lack of a better word. Definitely where the intrigue is, because Jonas Eidevall he stepped down, I think, with the official wording of it. It did seem like a bit of a strange move to step down and just immediately the club go, yep, cool. I think normally you would have some form of notice period, I guess. You don't just step down as a manager. I think this is a case of the club were likely to make him leave by sacking and have sort of let him kind of have it his own way and leave with a bit more dignity and a bit of respect, because he's done a very good job at Arsenal. They've achieved a good amount of success under him. I think not as much success as they would have liked, which is why he has now left. But he's still been overall a decent appointment, and they'll be hoping to find someone probably over the international break that's going to bump them up to somewhere definitely higher in the table, and hopefully for Arsenal, and I guess hopefully for me as an Arsenal fan, up the table, if not this season, then next season, and getting a WSL title once again. This fixture last season was a match that West Ham won 2-1 back in February. Alessia Russo put Arsenal 1-0 up before half-time, but Asay's penalty and Sissoko's 58th minute winner meant that this was actually West Ham's only win in 14 matches against Arsenal. Here's a sentence that I wasn't expecting to say at the start of the season, but after 4 games going into the 5th one, if West Ham win by 2 goals, they will go above Arsenal in the table. I thought Arsenal were going to be one of the top 3 pretty comfortably this season, and I thought West Ham were going to be probably one of the bottom 2 or 3. So to see West Ham at a point where if they win by a couple of goals at home, they could go above Arsenal is a bit of a shock to me, but I think that probably says more about Arsenal than it does about West Ham. West Ham have drawn 4 of their last 5 home matches in the WSL. The only one that wasn't a draw was a 2-0 loss to Chelsea, which, can't complain too much about a 2-0 loss to the champions. But that does show that Not only West Ham are struggling to win, but they're also kind of struggling to lose, and they're getting very close games. I think that's something that they'll likely keep up. Ryan Skinner is very good at not allowing oppositions to, get plenty of chances against them, and actually being a good, solid side is something that she's very good at coaching. Very good at. She's doing a very good job of that at West Ham. Arsenal, however, are unbeaten in their last 4 away WSL matches, scoring in each of those. West Ham, I've just mentioned, have drawn 4 of their last 5. They don't tend to score loads of goals. It's more about shutting the opposition out than it is about West Ham scoring loads. So with Arsenal being unbeaten and scoring in each of their last 4 away in the league, West Ham know they're going to have a task on their hands to keep up their run of, having decent results at home while only losing to Chelsea. West Ham have had the lowest possession in the WSL this season so far, at just 40%. That's really low. Obviously, the average is 50. They have made the most clearances in the league with 132, and Batiziak making most of those. Not literally over half, but she has made the most clearances in the league. West Ham have also made the most fouls in the league. They've committed 52 already in just 4 games. 13 a game. That's quite a lot. That's probably, what's that off the top of my head, like 1 every 8 minutes or something? Not great from them. But if it works, it works. Arsenal have had the most touches in the opposition's box, as I mentioned earlier, but it's not really coming to fruition for them. Their problem last season was their finishing. They underperformed against their XG, they didn't score enough goals, their key strikers didn't perform well enough against their XG individually, and ultimately I think that was what cost them the league. It's what cost them goals, which cost you points, which cost you matches, which cost you the league. You would hope after the summer, they've done some good recruitment, like Mariona Caldente has come in. They've obviously lost some decent players as well, like Chloe Lacasse, who scored a hat-trick recently. But you would expect that they'd kind of fix that issue because, they've had all summer to do it. They've got a decent-sized budget and all that jazz. But no, in fact, they've actually got the biggest difference between their XG and the goals scored this season. They've got 4 goals from 7 XG so far. -3, like I say, is the worst in the league. And something they'll need to pick up on. But it could be a new manager bounce. It could be a new energy, a new lease of life in the players. That is exactly what they need this weekend. I think we'll get a little bit of that. I think Arsenal are going to dominate the possession in this game. West Ham are probably going to look to score more from crosses after looking at how Arsenal have defended crosses recently, not just against Chelsea, but in their other league games and in Champions League as well. It's not been great. But I don't think West Ham are going to get many chances to put crosses in, I think, because of the small amount of possession they'll have. So I think West Ham will get dominated in this game. Arsenal will be way on top. I think they'll get a couple of goals and have an easy, comfortable, don't make too much noise about it kind of win. So I'm going to go for a 2-0 Arsenal win. And the final game of the weekend sees Chelsea host Spurs on Sunday evening, 6:45, live on Sky Sports if you're in the UK. Beth England, Drew Spence and Becky Spencer all visiting their former club. Beth England obviously now captain at Spurs after leaving Chelsea a couple of years ago. Amanda Nilden and Hayley Rasoy are potentially back this weekend. I think they've been 2 players that have been very strong for Spurs in the matches they've played. They obviously have, both picked up small injuries recently. Rasoy definitely missed in the last game for Spurs. I think her input, if she can be available this game, will be very valuable for Spurs. And Amanda Nilden as well has been fantastic. I know she's been named in the Sweden squad, so her knock can't be too bad. But it'll be interesting to see how much game time she still gets this weekend. Myra Ramirez picked up a knock at the weekend. There was an indication that she might be able to play midweek. So, as I've mentioned already, I'm recording this Wednesday lunchtime. I don't know if she's going to be playing or not this evening. If she does, you'll know that she's probably fine to play at the weekend. If she doesn't, that's still something to keep an eye on. This is the 15th meeting between the two sides. The first 14 have all gone in Chelsea's favour. It's been 14 wins for the Blues so far against Spurs. In all competitions, Chelsea have won their last 7 games. And in the WSL, here's a great stat. In the WSL, Chelsea have won, not just been unbeaten, but they have won 26 of their last 27 games at home. The only match they didn't win was a 1-0 loss to Man City back in February this year. Other than that, obviously Man City pipping them to, well, not pipping them, Chelsea pipped them, but fighting Chelsea all the way for the WSL title last season. It took a team of that calibre to be the only one that hasn't lost away at Chelsea, whether that's at Kingsmeadow or at Stamford Bridge. Spurs were a team that had a fantastic opening day. They won 4-0 at Palace and looked brilliant. It wasn't necessarily that Palace were awful, but it was much more that Spurs were great. Since that 4-0 win, however, they have only picked up 1 point from their last 3 games. They drew away at Aston Villa and then lost to Liverpool and obviously Man United last weekend. Now, they have played some good teams in there. You know, Villa are good, Liverpool are good, Manchester United are good. These are all teams that were either up there last season or have improved over the summer or both. But they're now facing Chelsea, which are going to be an even better team than those 3. So if they can only pick up 1 point from 3 teams that aren't as good as Chelsea, it's going to be a big ask this weekend for them to get something even further. Chelsea have scored the most goals in the WSL this season. That is despite having played a game less than everyone other than Manchester United. As I mentioned earlier, City are the ones with the most XG, so it probably won't come as a surprise to hear that Chelsea are the team that are performing best against their XG this season. In fact, from just 5.0 XG, they have scored 10 goals, so they have scored double the amount of goals their XG would suggest. That is no mean feat, and even a team like Chelsea, I don't think will continue that over the season. But while they're in this sort of purple patch, this, I don't know, honeymoon period, whatever you want to call it, with their new boss, Bompastor, they're going to want to keep that up for as long as they can. Chelsea have had the most goal-creating actions in the league with 18, 5 ahead of the next best teams, which are City and Spurs, both on 13. Spurs have had the most shots on target in the league this season with 27, and they've had the most, or the highest percentage of their shots on target. So 45% of the shots they've had, they've got on target, which is pretty good. I want to look at shots on target per game though, because obviously, as I mentioned, Chelsea have played 3 instead of 4, like most teams. Spurs have 6.8 shots on target per game, which is pretty good, second in the league. But guess who's first? It's Chelsea with 7 shots on target per game. That is skewed a little bit because they thrashed Crystal Palace, but then so did Spurs. I think this shows that both teams are getting a lot of shots on target, obviously, and working the keeper as much as possible and not just wasting their shots like a lot of teams can do. Spurs don't have a good record when it comes to post-shot XG. So I mentioned earlier Leicester having the best record against post-shot XG, which shows how good their keepers are being. Spurs are the opposite. Becky Spencer has not had a good time of it so far. She has conceded 8 goals from 5.0 XG, so 3 goals more, from 5 post-shot XG, so 3 goals more than you would expect, given the quality of shots on target that she has faced. Not great reading for Spurs, but they don't really have that much of another option at the moment. Obviously, Votikova, who I thought was quite good last season, has left the club. They've got sort of an emergency loan in from West Ham, but that's an emergency loan. Talbert, I think her name is. It's not someone they're going to be wanting to start unless probably Becky Spencer gets injured. I think this is just going to be a case of Spencer needing to play through it because she's a good goalkeeper. She's shown this in her time in the WSL. You know, she used to play for Chelsea, for example. She can't be that bad. I think this is a bit of a poor patch for her, but I expect that she will get through it. Spurs do have the oldest team in the WSL so far, so oldest team takes into account the age of each player in each game and does like a weighted average based on the amount of minutes they're played. Spurs have the oldest team on average at 28.4 years old, so I don't think that's too bad. That's basically in your prime, your late 20s. As someone that's 29, maybe I'm just clinging on to that, but I think Spurs are a team that on average is just going to be that little bit slower, whether that's speed of thought, whether that's actual movement, whether that's agility. They're going to be that little bit slower compared to the rest of the teams, and hopefully they can get through with their experience instead. How do I think this game's going to go? Well, I think Chelsea are going to dominate the game. I think Spurs will do quite well on the counter-attack, though. They're quite good at counter-attacking football. If Hayley Raso is back, that's especially somewhere where she's going to be really good because she's very good in those sort of 1v1 dribbling battles. She does really well with her progressive carries. So she's sort of filling that void of what Celine Bizet did, but also what Grace Clinton did. And should be really important for them. If she doesn't play, I think Chelsea will have quite an easy time of it. And I think because they've got an easier time of it, I think they'll then be allowed to attack more. I'm going to assume that Hayley Raso is playing, and I think Chelsea will have to defend that bit more and, not throw so many players forward because they'll need to defend against her. I still think Chelsea are going to have more than enough. I don't think Spurs are necessarily going to score. I wouldn't be surprised to see them score, but I think it's more likely that Chelsea are going to keep a clean sheet. I'm going to predict Chelsea are going to win 2-0. That is all from me this week, listener. It is, as I've said, Wednesday afternoon, so it's a little bit earlier than normal. Hopefully none of what I've said is going to be blown out the water after the Champions League games or, injuries picked up in training, etc. This is your regular shout to give the pod a 5-star review if you've enjoyed it. Hit follow, hit subscribe, depending on what it is, wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to follow me on social medias at Stattorino. I think Instagram and Twitter or X are definitely the main two, although there is the odd post on TikTok and Threads as well. But I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, listener. I hope you enjoy the weekend as well. Obviously, it is the last WSL weekend before the international break. The England squad is already out. I think it's quite a strong squad, as it always is. It's really good to see Lucy Parker on there. I think she's had a great season so far and definitely deserves her call-up. And then I think the youth squads are coming out later today as well. So enjoy the rest of your week, enjoy the weekend's games, and I will speak to you at the next one.